I should have known something was wrong when I found him staring at our wedding binder at 3 in the morning. But let me back up. The call that changed everything came on a Tuesday morning while I was brushing my teeth. Valerie's voice was shaking. Dominic's mom, who I'd never heard cry in 5 years. "Honey, we need to talk. There's something you need to know about my son." My mouth went dry, toothpaste foam still clinging to my lips. "What do you mean?" "Meet me at Morrison's Coffee in an hour. Please." The thing is, I'd been ignoring the signs for months. Dominic had been different ever since we set our October wedding date. Distant, checking his phone constantly, making jokes about being tied down that didn't feel like jokes anymore. It started small. When I'd show him venue photos, he'd wince at the prices. When I texted about caterers, he'd respond hours later with, "Whatever you want." I told myself it was normal. Guys don't care about centerpieces, right? Then came that Friday night dinner that should have been romantic. I'd made reservations at this new Italian place, bought his favorite beer, even wore the green dress he'd complimented months ago. But Dominic sat across from me like he was attending his own funeral. "I'm not sure I'm ready for all this," he said, picking at his untouched pasta. "The wedding, marriage, everything. 5 years together, 8 months engaged, and now he wasn't sure?" The ride home was silent except for the sound of my heart breaking in slow motion. That night, he slept on the couch. The next morning, he left to watch football with his work buddy Paul, mumbling something about needing space to think. I should have been furious. Instead, I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out my insides with a spoon. My best friend Lena dragged me to Target for retail therapy, her cure for everything. I wandered the aisles buying unnecessary throw pillows, trying to convince myself this was just pre-wedding jitters. That's what people kept telling me anyway. But then Kyler called. Kyler worked with Dominic, and his voice was shaky when I answered. "Hey, are you okay? Things got weird at the bar today." "What do you mean weird?" A long pause. "Maybe I shouldn't." "Tell me." The guys were giving Dom a hard time about settling down, you know? And Paul asked what was holding him back from being excited about the wedding. Kyler's voice dropped. "Dom was pretty drunk, and he said if you were prettier, he'd be more excited about marrying you." Then he laughed like it was a joke. The parking lot around me tilted sideways. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, crying until my mascara made black tracks down my cheeks. The man who'd proposed to me on our favorite hiking trail had just used my appearance as a punchline. When I finally went inside, Dominic was passed out on the couch, still in his clothes, reeking of beer and bad decisions. I locked myself in our bedroom with our cat, Beans, and stared at my engagement ring until the diamond blurred through my tears. The next morning, Dominic tried his standard apology breakfast. Coffee and bacon, like carbs, could fix what he'd broken. When I confronted him about what Kyler had told me, his face crumbled. "I was drunk," he said. "The guys were ragging on me and I said something stupid to shut them up. You humiliated me in front of your friends." "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like, Dominic?" "Because from where I'm sitting, you used my face as the reason you don't want to marry me." I couldn't stay in that apartment, breathing the same air as someone who could hurt me so carelessly. I grabbed my purse and drove to my brother Elliot's place, my safe harbor since childhood. That's when Valerie called, crying about something important I needed to know. Now here I was, sitting across from her in Morrison's Coffee, watching her shred a napkin into tiny pieces with trembling fingers. She looked different. No makeup, hair disheveled, like she'd aged 5 years overnight. "There's something Dominic should have told you himself," she began. "About Maria." Maria, the new project coordinator at his company, the woman he'd mentioned casually a few times, the one I'd met briefly at their holiday party. "What about Maria?" My voice sounded strange, like it was coming from underwater. Valerie's eyes filled with fresh tears. "Dominic called me Sunday night, completely falling apart. He's developed feelings for her. Nothing physical, he swears, but an emotional connection. It's why he's questioning everything about your relationship." The coffee shop noise faded to a dull roar. I thought about the timeline. Maria starting at his company around New Year's. Dominic's increasing distance. All those late nights he blamed on work projects. "How long?" I whispered. A few months, maybe longer. He's been talking to her, texting about work, but Valerie wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I lived through this with his father. The distance, the cruel comments, the manufactured fights. I won't watch my son put you through what I went through. The joke at the bar suddenly made perfect sense. Not just drunken stupidity, but sabotage. A way to push me away without having to make the hard choice himself. When I finally made it back to my car, my phone buzzed with another text from Dominic. I'm sorry. I love you. Please come home so we can talk. But there was no mention of Maria, still hiding the truth. I typed back, I know about Maria. Don't contact me again until you're ready to tell me the complete truth. Then I blocked his number and drove to Lena's apartment, where she already had the pull-out couch made up and Thai food on the way. That's the kind of friend everyone deserves during a crisis. But the story doesn't end there. Because the next morning, I got a text from an unknown number. Margot, this is Maria. I know you blocked Dominic. Can we meet tomorrow? There's more to the story that you should know. Just the two of us. I stared at that message for a long time, my heart hammering against my ribs. What more could there possibly be? We met at a small breakfast place near the park. Maria looked nothing like the confident woman I remembered from the company party. Her hair was in a messy bun, no makeup, fidgeting with her coffee cup like her life depended on it. What she told me changed everything. I had no idea Dominic had feelings for me until Paul mentioned it last week, she said, sliding her phone across the table. Look at our texts. It's all work stuff. Maybe some memes. Nothing romantic. I scrolled through months of messages. She was right. Boring work conversations. Nothing that crossed any lines. Paul's been stirring things up, Maria continued. I overheard him encouraging Dominic to explore his options before settling down. He specifically mentioned me as someone who gets Dominic better than you do. By the end of our meeting, I realized Maria wasn't the villain I'd imagined. She was collateral damage in Paul's manipulation and Dominic's weakness. That's when I decided to arrange a family meeting. Not to save my relationship. That ship had sailed, but to get the truth out in the open once and for all. Karina, Dominic's sister, hosted at her apartment. When everyone gathered around her dining table, me, Dominic, Valerie, Karina, and yes, even Paul, the truth finally came out. Dominic admitted everything. The emotional affair that existed only in his head, his fears about turning into his father, who'd abandoned their family for another woman. Paul's toxic influence, constantly telling him he was missing out on his freedom. I was terrified of becoming him, Dominic said, his voice barely above a whisper. When I started feeling confused about Maria, I panicked. Instead of talking to you, I pushed you away. The joke at the bar, it had nothing to do with how you look. Paul was calling me whipped, and instead of defending our relationship, I said something horrible to seem cool. Paul tried to dismiss it all as guy talk, but Karina shut him down immediately. They're supposed to get married in 3 months, she snapped. That simple statement, the reminder of our rapidly approaching wedding, hit me like a physical blow. Save the dates had gone out. Deposits had been paid. My dress was hanging in Lena's spare closet. I don't think the wedding is happening anymore, I said quietly. The room went silent. After hours of tears, heated words, and difficult truths, we reached the inevitable conclusion. The wedding was off. Our 5-year relationship had run its course. It wasn't a screaming match or dramatic exit. It was a mutual recognition that something fundamental had broken between us. Trust, maybe, that could be rebuilt eventually, but not in time for an October wedding. 3 months later, I'm writing this from my new apartment. It's smaller, quieter, with a tiny balcony where I'm learning to grow herbs. The basil keeps dying, but the mint is thriving against all odds. I choose to see that as symbolic. The hardest part wasn't the big moments, canceling the venue, returning gifts, changing my relationship status. It was the small things, our shared Spotify playlists, the honeymoon research folder on my laptop. Little pieces of a future that no longer existed. But here's what I learned. Sometimes the most beautiful thing you can do is choose yourself. Next week, I'm taking that honeymoon alone. 10 days in a cottage overlooking the water, reading books and eating ice cream for breakfast if I want to. My mom thinks I'm crazy. Elliot offered to come along. I said no. I don't know what comes next. Maybe I'll meet someone new eventually. Maybe I'll adopt another cat. Maybe I'll finally learn to keep Basil alive. What I do know is this. I deserve someone who's certain about me. Someone who doesn't need a family intervention to figure out their feelings. Someone who would never use my face as the punchline to a cruel joke, no matter how drunk or pressured they felt. The engagement ring still sits in my dresser drawer, but it doesn't feel heavy anymore. It's just a ring, pretty, expensive, but ultimately just metal and stone. The weight I'd been carrying wasn't from the ring itself, but from trying to hold together something that had already broken. Some endings aren't dramatic. They're quiet recognitions that you deserve better than someone who can't choose you with their whole heart. And sometimes that quiet recognition is the most powerful thing of all. Standing on my balcony this morning, watching the sunrise paint my apartment walls golden, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of possibility.